I'm so glad to be here.
All right.
I've wanted to come and talk to parents all year long, and so I'm glad to finally have an opportunity to do that. I've been behind the scenes a whole lot, so thanks for having me, Nina.
So happy to hear. So this is Amanda Gorman, a piece of her poem. I just felt like it was a way we could orient ourselves to this subject today. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true, that even if we grieved, we grew. Even if we hurt, we hoped. And that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together victorious. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in the bridges we've made. That is the promise to the glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare. So welcome. Moriah, I'm just so excited to have Moriah here. She's a beloved colleague of mine. Moriah's an amazing class teacher. And in her, she's on maternity time right now, raising two boys, had a baby in, what was it?
July.
July, so really recent.
Mm-hmm.
But all her time here, as Moriah was class teaching, she really brought her passion for this topic to all of us. We did many studies with her. I'm going to let her tell you a little bit more about her training and her background. But I always felt so inspired by Moriah's passion and really her incentive to keep us looking deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And so we've spent a lot of time. And this is a beautiful moment in the school where now Moriah actually has a position as a DEI coordinator, and she meets with teachers and she goes through our resources and again, just really keeps us tracking because it's a complicated and deep topic, especially in education, and that we're always learning with and coming with fresh eyes. And Moriah's really, really helping us to do that right now. So Moriah, welcome. Really happy to have you here this morning.
Thank you so much, Nina. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here with you. Thanks for making the time. I'm going to just go over what we'll be doing, what my hopes are for today. And I know we just have until 10 o'clock, and I'm going to respect that. So we might not get to all the fruitful things, but we'll see what we can do. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and what brought me to this work, to give that context, and tell you a little bit about what has been happening historically and then currently in regards to DEI topics at the Siskiyou School, both with faculty and with the students and so forth. And then I'm going to have us unpack some terms, some DEI terms that I think even the term DEI or diversity, equity, and inclusion, we say these words a lot and we hear them a lot, but I'm going to give us a little time to really dive in and understand what they mean, and as well as some other aspects of identity. We're going to talk about mostly identity today, and finish with some sharing from you all around what is meaningful to you in your family culture. Greg, you mentioned, that you have diverse religions in your household. And so I'm hoping that everybody will feel comfortable to share something of their family culture so we can really see that there's so much beautiful diversity right here in our Siskiyou School, and start to highlight that more. As I'm talking and as we're sharing, I wanted to invite a couple of things in that came from Hilda Montenegro Fix and Marvin Woodard, whom we have done trainings with, DEI and cultural agility trainings as teachers and board. We have met with them a couple of times, and a couple of things that they offered that stood out to me were, first, to think when you're hearing something or approaching a topic like this, to say to yourself, maybe it's different than I have known before. Maybe there's something new here for me. And I I think it can be easy to go in with the things that we feel like we know, and I am also going to come in today thinking maybe it's different than I have known before. And then the second thing is WAIT, which is an acronym, and it can stand for one of two things or three things. First, what am I thinking? What's going through my mind? And then before it's your turn to speak, or before you feel called to speak, ask yourself, why am I talking? What is it that I'm trying to get across right now? Where is this coming from? Why am I saying this? And it's really helpful in these kinds of conversations, especially for those of us like me, who's a teacher and likes to fill the room with talking a lot. And then there are those of us who are a little more introverted, perhaps, or just don't feel as comfortable speaking in front of the group. And if those of you are in this room, I'd like for you to ask yourself, why aren't I talking? Why am I not sharing? What is holding me back? And is there something that I do have to offer? So those are some things I want us to do in the room today to create a space where hopefully everyone feels comfortable to share. I'm a teacher, so I like when people have a paper and a pen. I know some of you are on a walk, so that's maybe not happening, but you might want to have that today. There might be some opportunities for you to write some things down or express yourself in other ways on paper. So my biography, I'm Moriah Malstadt. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I like to offer my pronouns because I don't want to assume that anyone's gender identity is what I expect that it is. And so I like to offer mine to create a space for others. I grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I grew up in really the heart of the city. The church that was next door to my house growing up was an LGBTQ church. The spiritual center kitty corner from my house was a Dakota Indigenous spiritual center. I had neighbors from all over the world. I had Black neighbors, I had white neighbors. And growing up in this really multicultural place, I think really informed who I am as a person and how I see and understand the world. I have been a Waldorf teacher since 2011. I've been a class teacher since 2014. And I also am a student of women, gender, and sexuality studies. That is my major in my undergrad. And when I became a Waldorf teacher, I didn't finish my BA. I kind of put it on the back burner and dove headfirst into teaching. But in the past couple of years, I felt a call to go back into it. And it was actually right in spring of 2011 that I started. I started in March, continuing. So I've been teaching and pregnant and doing lots of things while also taking classes to finish my women, gender, and sexuality studies degree. And the timing couldn't have been more perfect because the conversations happening in those classes are really, really focused on intersectionality. When I was in college the first time, right after high school, there was not as much focus on that. And it was a lot of still what I would call second wave feminism, where there was a lot of white-centeredness in it. And now we have conversations about race and ability and disability and neurodivergence. We have conversations about religion. We have all kinds of conversations about all people, and as well a lot more conversations about the LGBTQ community and how folks are impacted. So that is my background. So it's this women, gender, and sexuality studies with this Waldorf, and it's brought me here to this DEI coordinator position. I was really grateful that I was already in those classes in the moment when the uprising started in summer of 2020, because I felt like I was already kind of immersed in conversations of inequality, and it gave me a framework to bring something to the school with that. And the school has really taken this up in a really direct way since then, but it's not the first time. The Siskiyou school has had an interest in this for a long time. We had trainings with Hilda in 2018, I believe it was. So long before that. So it's been of interest to folks for a long time. And certainly Nina has brought a lot about working with children with different learning needs and different learning styles. So it's existed for a while. We have gender neutral bathrooms. That's existed for a while. So it's there, and then it's come in a more earnest way, I would say, more recently. So that's kind of me and where I come from and where the Siskiyou School has been. This year, my focus has been a lot on working with the teachers and looking at curriculum. So the Waldorf curriculum is a beautiful, beautiful one. And there also are limitations because it was founded in Europe by a white man 100 years ago. And so Rudolf Steiner, for all his amazing gifts and beautiful things that he has brought to Waldorf education, there's simply a limitation based on who he was and his experience of the world. Now, here we are in America in the 21st century, and things are a little bit different. So as teachers, we all have really been wanting to see how can we take this beautiful Waldorf curriculum and make sure that we are diligent to make it inclusive, to make sure that we're not only telling fairy tales from Europe in first grade, for example, to make sure that all races are represented in our chalk drawings, to ensure that different learning styles are not only celebrated, but are really able to thrive in the classroom. And so, again, it's something that a lot of folks have had on their radar for a long time. But my role this year is to go through our resources and to be available to the teachers when they have questions around things like that. So I've been going through the classrooms and going through the different things and looking at what can I bring in? An example I can give is that I taught fifth grade last year. And so that's really like in my mind. And looking at Alexander the Great, who there's a reason he's called Alexander the Great, he's did a lot of things. But when I've taught the Persian Wars in the past, I've taught it from the Alexander the Great perspective only. Last year, I thought, I wonder what the Persians thought of all this. And so it's bringing in multiple perspectives. And it's not that you're teaching history differently. It's that you're teaching it more inclusively. You're teaching it in a more real way and not just a Eurocentric way. There are also, it goes beyond race, of course. I was able to find a lot more stories of women that were included in battles in ancient Greece. And it wasn't always, but they were there and they had some pretty pivotal roles in some of the battles. And so when we're teaching about something like that, to really think like, where's the diversity? Where is it? And how do I make sure that I make that known to the children in an age appropriate way? So that's a lot of the work that I'm doing right now. There's also been some work in the middle school. Marvin Woodard, who did our trainings, and he's the racial justice coordinator at SOU. He came into the middle school and did some work with them around what is equality and equity, and how do you interrupt bias when you see someone mistreating someone else based on something about them. How do you go in and say, hey, that's not okay? Like, it can be that simple, and what are some creative ways that we can do that? And then how do you check in with the person that's been mistreated and say, how are you? And we don't necessarily think of that as like a big DEI issue because we do it as teachers all the time. Even I drop my son off at preschool and I watch his teacher navigate these like 3, 4, 5-year-olds saying horrible things to each other about how like she can't jump rope very good, so I don't want her here. They say these things, and their teachers so beautifully working on inclusion with them in those moments. And so with the children, it's built in a way. And then I think as teachers, it's important for us to think the bigger thing in our own minds, even if we're not saying it directly to the kids, that there's something bigger here, but that we know it and that we understand what's going on. So with that, I'm gonna, this pandemic has made me make PowerPoints. I've like never ever wanted to make a PowerPoint, but now I'm on the computer way more. So I made you a PowerPoint today. I'm going to share my PowerPoint here and unpack some of this DEI terminology. Okay. Does that look good for everybody? See that? Okay, great. So diversity, equity, and inclusion. What is meant by DEI, and how can we recognize the diversity of our families in the Siskiyou school? I'm going to call on you for a moment. I'm wondering if anybody would like to try to define any of these three words: diversity, equity, or inclusion. Does anybody want to attempt that? And maybe if you, just speak out.
Right, I've heard a nice metaphor for this before, and it's the idea, this resonated with me, it's the idea we can think about like if everyone needs shoes, right? Everybody gets a pair of shoes, right? But we have to make sure the shoes are the right size for each student. So metaphorically looking at it that way, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And that was an actual practice that Marvin did with the students, that where he had 4 students take off their shoes and mix them all up in a pile. And he was like, all right, quick as you can, grab 2 shoes. And like one kid was like, I have 2 right-footed shoes. Like, well, put your shoes on. We all have shoes. We're all equal, right? And technically, yes, we are all equal. We all do have shoes. But if some folks don't have the shoes that work for them, don't have the proper resources for their own selves, then it isn't really equality, right? And that's really a question of equity. Folks having what they need to be successful and to grow in the world. So thank you for that. Does anybody want to try diversity or inclusion, defining those? And you can just unmute yourself and speak out if you want to try. Okay, maybe we'll just go right to it. So diversity is defined as the practice of including people from a variety of different identities. Equity is everyone has their needs met and has the resources they need to be successful. And inclusion, each person feels a sense of belonging. And I would add to that that each person works to include others too. I think it's a two-way street. Let's see. So this is an identity wheel. Some of you may have seen some versions of this before. And we did some of this work with Hilda and Marvin, where you look at these different aspects of identity and see, how do you identify? I'm going to give everyone a moment to just kind of look at it. And you can even write some things down if you want. Actually, I'm wondering if anybody, I'm going to ask for participation again. See if anybody wants to read this, these top ones, starting with first language, going over to here. Does anybody want to read those? Just unmute yourself. Yeah, go ahead, Erica.
First language, nationality, disability, age, religion, and sex.
Thank you. Does anybody want to read the bottom? Yeah, go ahead.
Socioeconomic status, race, culture, ethnicity, sexuality, and gender.
Thank you. I wanted to look into this a little more deeply. I was realizing that some of these words can kind of get lumped together, and this might be very, very familiar for some of you. And so forgive me if it's old news, but I also think it's just, it never hurts to revisit it, especially in regards to race, culture, ethnicity, and nationality, which often get all lumped into one thing, and they're actually unique. So we're going to look at that. We're going to start with gender and sexuality. I like this little human here. Gender expression is represented by these little dotted lines here. It's the way a person communicates their gender identity to others by the way they dress, act, or refer to themselves. So at the beginning, I said that my pronouns are she, her. That's how I identify. That's part of my gender expression. I have a fairly feminine gender expression, and with some aspects of masculinity too. And it is a whole spectrum, right? So I don't have to choose one. I can express various aspects of myself, and my gender identity is pointing to the mind here. It's a person's internal sense of being a man or a woman or anything in between. Orientation or attraction, this is sexuality. This is a term to describe sexual and or romantic attractions to others. And finally, sex, the labels male, female, or intersex given to someone at birth based on their body parts. So again, often we think these things often get lumped all together, and that actually there can be a whole various recipe for each individual person. And when we can honor and respect that, then people can be authentic. Racial and cultural identities. So here's race, ethnicity, culture, and nationality. Would somebody like to read the definition of race?
Sure, I'll read it.
Thank you, Alita.
Based on similar physical and biological attributes, American Indian or Alaskan Native, Asian, Black or African American, Native Hawaiian, or Pacific Islander, white.
And I would also add to that multiracial, that a person can identify as more than one race. Would someone like to read ethnicity?
Based on cultural expressions and place of origin. And then examples. How do you pronounce the first?
Ojibwe. It's an indigenous, yeah.
Yeah, Ojibwe, Nigerian, Irish, Chinese, etc.
Yeah. And obviously one can be multi-ethnic as well. Culture. Would anyone like to read culture?
The characteristics and, oh, go ahead.
Oh, Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, go.
Okay. The characteristics and knowledge of a particular group of people, encompassing language, religion, cuisine, social habits, music, and arts.
Thank you. And nationality? Ms. Galway, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'm going to let somebody in here, so if somebody else.
Sure.
does.
Okay, somebody else, nationality?
Yes, the status of belonging to the particular nation, sometimes related to ethnicity, but not always. Namibian, American, Peruvian.
Thank you. Any questions about any of the things I've just said about this or about gender identity and expression or? Okay, great. We'll keep going. So I think in the interest of time, I was going to have us consider filling this out and asking which aspect of my identity do I think about most often? Which aspect do I think about the least often? I would also add, why do you think that is? And then which aspect of my identity do I feel proud of? And maybe that can be many. I'm going to have us skip this for now because I want us to get to this other thing that I think is really even a little more juicy and maybe folks can, I'm happy to send out this wheel or you can just, if you just Google identity wheel, you'll find many, many different kinds and it's kind of an interesting exercise to do for yourself. So our own cultures here in our families, our own personalities, and in our school are incredibly valuable. They make us who we are in so many ways. And so something that I would like to invite us to do is to think of something that is unique to your family culture. It is the holiday season right now. Hanukkah just happened. Christmas, Kwanzaa are on the way, many other holidays being celebrated. And I would like to invite you to think of something that is meaningful in your family, something that you feel is unique to your culture. I'll start by sharing something that's unique in my family. My ancestors are from what was then called Czechoslovakia. It was Czechoslovakia when they immigrated here. And unfortunately, we have lost that language aspect. When my great-great-grandma came here, she was adamant that she was not going to learn English because she wanted to hold on to as much of her Czech heritage as she possibly could. But my great-great-grandfather did learn English. And by the time it got to my grandmother, she didn't know a word of Czech. But something that stayed in our family was the food. And that still is true all these generations later. At Christmas time, my family makes kolache, which is this bread that you see on the left. It's a poppy seed rolled bread. So you make the dough and then you spread the poppy seed paste over it, and then you roll it and bake it. And then when you cut, it's this beautiful spiral. It's something that my family has every Christmas. My grandma always made it, but she passed away. And since she passed, my mom and her brother, my uncle, argue like a full-on argument, not like a silly, like you do it, like a real argument, like where I leave the room about who's going to make the kolache this year. It's so special and important in our family that it causes family drama. Kolache. But every time I eat it, I feel connected to my grandma. I remember her when I was little rolling the dough. And she would talk about her grandma and her mom in that time. And I feel most connected to my culture when I'm eating foods like that. I'm going to stop sharing so we can see each other's faces. And I'd love to open it up and see if anybody else wants to share something meaningful for your family culture around this holiday or these holidays or others, or anything that comes up for you. After we do some sharing, we can open it up for just discussion, questions, other things like that. Did anybody want to start? Anybody have something that they feel called to share? Yeah, Renee, go ahead.
Hi, so I am Indigenous Mexican, Coahuiltecan tribe, and some of my grandparents came over from Mexico, and some were already in what is now the United States when it was still Mexico. But my grandmother came over when she was 17, and she was trying to assimilate and therefore did not teach any of her children Spanish, my mother. So we didn't learn Spanish. But like, same thing with the food that always kind of remained true to our culture. So at Christmas time, we would always make tamales and have a huge tamale making party. And I have a very large family on both sides. I have about 30 cousins on each side.
Wow.
So we would, and my grandmother was a well-known person in her community and had her own business and took care of a lot of people in the community. So we would have a huge tamale making party and on average make about 80 dozen tamales. And I remember going to school when I was younger and sharing what we did over the weekend, and it said we made tamales and we made 80 dozen. And I had a teacher say, no, you must be mistaken. You must mean like 8 dozen. Because that's kind of a crazy number of tamales to make. But that's what we did, because we had a huge family and everybody took their own to share with their family and their neighbors. And yeah, it's just a really sweet memory. I don't have any of my grandparents alive anymore, so it's very special for me to do that with my girls and our family.
Beautiful. Thank you. I can like smell it. Thank you for sharing.
Yes, thank you.
I can share.
Thank you, Alita.
Yeah. So we don't have a lot of cultural traditions, honestly, that we do in our family that have been kind of passed down. My ancestry is Scottish and Swiss German. And in my grandparents to my parents' generation, there was a major rift of the 60s and 70s. And my parents really sort of like went a complete different direction from their parents. And so I never really felt close to them or felt connected to my cultural lineage in that way. There's a couple of things that might, be there, like we always open one gift on Christmas Eve, for example. And I think that's something that my grandparents did with my parents on both sides, my mom's side and my dad's side. But really, my parents sort of filled in a lot and came up with their own cultural traditions. And one of them is just time in nature. So we always do a lot of just walks in the forest, and we go out and cut a Christmas tree. That's always been a tradition that I know was something that my mom and dad started. That wasn't something from my, Scottish culture. So, well, I actually don't know. I just feel, growing up, I was very disconnected. I didn't know what it meant to have Scottish ancestry. There was never anything going on in that area
Yeah.
of my life. So I don't know even what to call my culture. I guess it's like sort of Northwest. I don't know. I don't have a name for it. And that's sort of been that way my whole life.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think there's a real tenderness about that for a lot of folks in the United States, because there is this aspect of assimilation that happens when folks immigrate here, and that's either by choice or really asked of them, or insisted of them. And so, yeah, I think, like we all have said, like we lost the language, or the three of us that have shared. So thank you for sharing that. And I think we can certainly create something meaningful for ourselves. I know I have traditions in my family that I want to create for my sons, and so we can create our own culture too.
Yeah. I think it's, probably different for me because my ancestors were part of the dominant white culture. And so it wasn't forced upon them to stop their, traditions. It was more like my parents feeling, like they didn't like that about their parents. It was really a family. It was the 60s and the 70s, I guess. So it was their own cultural movement away from their cultures.
Thank you for sharing. Anybody else? Julia?
Yeah.
And then Erica?
I really love instilling a daily practice of our family does a daily practice of gratitude. So I really try to find the common themes among so many different spiritual beliefs. And what I want my son to learn is that there's so many different shapes, colors, sizes, all the things. There's no one way, right? But we can celebrate the beauty, and how we do that I think, is sharing, joy, sharing gratitude, right? Really bringing that into our daily lives. And so I love the seasonal traditions and cultural pieces. I just, every day, try with Levi, we light a candle for every meal that we share, and we name something that we're grateful for, and just really trying to ground in that despite so much uncertainty in the world, polarity, all the things. So that's a big one in our house.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Erica?
I was appreciating Alita's sharing, because my grandmother, who's no longer alive, was also Scottish. And I was sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know that we had really family kind of traditions passed down. And I think what I'm realizing is she grew up in a very poor family in Scotland, and emigrated to the US. I think it was during the war, and fell in love with my American grandfather, a soldier, and came to the US. And my mom always described it as, she wanted to put all of her Scottish days in life, I guess, before coming to the US, behind her. And so she never talked about it with us. And I was so close with my grandmother, but she never talked to me about anything related to Scotland. And many years later, we learned that she had a brother no one knew about. I mean, she had all these stories that, came out at the end of her life. And so none of the Scottish got passed down. And yet she had a very thick Scottish brogue accent, and, was so close, so embedded in our family. So it's kind of interesting, similar but different stories about the Scottish tradition. But she always made fudge every Christmas. And so, every year, our family would make the same recipe from my grandmother's fudge, which we're making this weekend. My mom, my sister, and I are making together. And I realized that is something that's really passed down from her.
Thank you. Greg or Doozy or Miss Galway?
So my family is from, my grandmother's from Austria and my grandfather is from Croatia. This is on my mom's side, where a lot of my kind of cultural heritage comes from. And it's kind of different than the people who wanted to leave it all behind. Like their whole house is filled with old guns from the Ottoman Empire and cuckoo clocks from Austria. It's just this total, yeah, I think my grandmother is, she never got to go back she never went back after the war, and she brought Austria with her to her house. But our tradition, which I find kind of unique, because I don't really know where it comes from. I think I've asked them, but what really our Christmas was centered around Christmas Eve, where there's angels that come and decorate the tree. I don't know whether it's Croatian or Austrian or just some kind of family tradition that comes from her, but the angels come and decorate the tree, and no kids can go near the tree till after dinner when they ring a bell and everybody goes, and these lights are lit up, and there's all this hair around the tree, and this angel hair, and the angels bring the presents. And our Christmas table is all it's smoked salmon and smoked oysters and octopus salad and caviar and Kartoffelsalat from Germany, and cucumber salad and Rotkraut. So it's really, rich like that, and I really appreciate it. Happy to have it.
Thank you for sharing. Doozy, did you want to share?
Yeah, I speak a little English only. I can share 1 minute. Yeah, my traditional kind of our tradition to make first of December, Christmas Eve. December 1st day, we celebrate at carol song, just all family together. We sing carol, and we make kobok. That is sticky rice cake. We make sticky rice, and then we make cake, and then we eat together. That is really our family traditional kind of traditional style. First of
Thank you.
Christmas Eve. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Nina, do you want to share something?
Sure. I was really resonating with Alita because it's, I come from Irish, Scottish background as well. And I started off my school experience in Catholic school. And then my mom, it was the 60s, did a complete about face, and we moved to Bangkok, and she threw out and she went, into the whole Eastern traditions. So I have all these kind of warbled, moments of we did Christmas Eve, and it was really, I remember going to the midnight masses as a 9-year-old and, thinking about the 9-year change. It was just the beauty of the music. But then we always had curry dishes and all these lotus flowers because my mom was doing the whole thing. So, but what I really come away with is it was the simplest things, the traditions. She came up with this one where we would go out on Christmas Eve afternoon and we would decorate way up in the forest. We would decorate the trees for the animals. And we would make the pine cones with the peanut butter and seeds, and we would leave. And that feeling as a child that I had left food for these animals on Christmas Eve. So then I did that with my son, and he still goes up. He's 27. He's like, you want to go up and do the forest? And so it's so interesting to me that it's really the simplest things. The other tradition was that children only made handmade gifts. And I remember my mom setting up this craft room for 2 weeks before, and we just spent hours in there, and she just left us alone with all the stuff, and we just made gifts for our grandparents and everything, and it was so rich. So then for years I held a Santa's workshop here for kids way back when I had more time, but where they would do that, and just that kind of those simple things that can get passed on that means so much. So it's really worth taking the time to just think about what's living for your family, Yeah. Anyways. So we still
Sounds amazing.
We still have curry. I don't know why. I just think of Christmas with curry. That's whatever.
That's beautiful. It reminds me of when I worked at Waldorf School in Chicago, and one of our winter fair activities was that we would fill one of the kindergarten classrooms, just long tables filled with things so the children could make crafts and ornaments. And there were some that were a specific way to make it, and then others where it was just go ahead, 3-year-old, and you do what you want to do with that glitter. And it was the children loved it, and it was so cool to see what they created with their freedom. Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing some of your traditions. And yeah, I love that it can be this thing that's been passed down from generation to generation, or it can be as simple as lighting a candle and gratitude. And it can be anything in between. And so I appreciate your sharing. We have about 8 minutes left, and I wanted to offer this time if anybody else has something to say or questions to ask. I didn't get into I consciously didn't get into a lot of things about marginalization and inequality and those kinds of things today. I am going to be hoping to do a parent evening for the whole school in the springtime. And so might get into a little bit more deep things then, but for today, I just really wanted to get to see some faces and just kind of talk about diversity a little bit. And so, but I welcome any questions. So I'm just going to open that up.
I want to share one thing, I think, Moriah, that I feel has been so rich. We've been going through our literature, really looking at what's still, Little House on the Prairie is an example. And I love the way Moriah brought it because, the Indians in that story are not really looked upon in a very positive light. There's a lot of fear. And so, and then we were sitting with, do we throw out, all that? But so what I've really come to is it comes up more and more and more where you're reading something and it was something that was classic and for you was so precious, but it's just taking the moment to actually have the conversation. So maybe the book doesn't totally get thrown out, but now like going, wow, I wonder, how was that? So those were the, and having like bringing it to light, if nothing else. So I'm finding more and more opportunities to have those conversations with the children, and just in things that come up, and just keeping that more in our consciousness rather than just reading the thing and just moving on.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, definitely. I think there are ways in which we can use uh, some like books that have language or ways that people are talked about or described that we know to be offensive, and we can use those for as teaching moments. And then I also part of my work is bringing in books that are more diverse, that have more diverse protagonists, diverse authors, where um, because I also don't want to subject children that are marginalized to having to witness those teaching moments over and over and over again. And to be able to just read a book with, like, for example, I read the book Wonder with my fifth graders last year. It's a book about a child who is born with disabilities, and he's this protagonist, and they loved it, and some of them like wanted to read it multiple times, and um, so yeah, and also bringing, I think in particular, something I see and hear a whole lot as a need is like books with children of color, but the books aren't about race. It's just that the person is a person of color, and that's the story. The story is like a little girl going on an adventure, and the little girl is black. It's just like, but it doesn't have to be this whole thing about civil rights all the time. It can just be like people are here. So I think both are true. I think those teaching moments are important, and I also think it's important for folks and children just to feel seen and comfortable.
Mariah, I know we have just a few minutes left, but I was really looking forward to this topic. We're newer to the school. We were part of Portland Waldorf School for the last 3 years, and I'm part of a global movement with my corporation for DE&I. And I am so grateful that the work is being done to look at the curriculum, and really take, fresh eyes at a lot of this, because I do see that there's a lot of work that we still need to do, right? And in the stories that we're sharing, the seeds that we're planting. And I would really love to advocate for an opportunity for parents to also get involved in the work. Like, I would love to be a part of a parent volunteer DE&I committee at the Siskiyou School. And just for the sake of, I echo 100% what you're saying with regard to just having the protagonist be, somebody of color, or, for instance, Levi and I were playing with these little wooden dolls, and he's given genders to each of them, kind of depends on the day, right? But we wanted to do a wedding ceremony, for these. And I was like, okay, who's getting married? Are the two boys getting married? Are the two girls getting married? Is the boy and the girl getting, so just kind of representing what, there isn't one way, right, to go about it. And so modeling that in the curriculum, I would love to see more of that. So that's just really where I want to plant the seed for the group.
Yeah, definitely. And that's where my work comes in. And the thing that I keep allowing myself to remember is that it takes time. Like, I have all these ideas in my head, and then to like implement them, it does take time. And for a lot of people, there's like an unlearning of certain habits or ideals that have been imposed, and so or a relearning of something new. And so yeah, but 100%, I agree. And as far as the DEI committee, it's something that I and other teachers are wishing for as well. I think it's, again, a thing that takes time to get there. But the thing that I want to advocate for is if you as parents are feeling like you want to get together and talk about things connected to DEI and your children, like, please do. Outside of the school, I definitely think that parents can take up some of that like I don't have to be there necessarily, you know, it can be your own group, your own kind of like study group around it. And I want to advocate for that as well. But yes, I would love to have more bridges between the faculty and the parents with this work, because I know a lot of parents have fantastic ideas to bring too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I second that, Julia. I really would love to see parents involved in just talking about race and racism and diversity, and you know, having those conversations more. It really hit me in first grade. When my son was in first grade, I went through with the public school system here in Ashland. I think it was just called Let's Talk About Race. And it was facilitated by a couple of admin or teachers in the public school system here. And I just really, it really was a huge eye-opening for me. And one of the things that I noticed was in my son's main lesson book, all the people that he drew were gold. And that just I was like, whoa, I didn't even notice that before. You know, before I went through that program with the public school system. So I would just love to have something like that. And it could be, I'd be happy to help organize or bring in an outside facilitator for the parents also, because I just think, you know, the Waldorf curriculum is from Europe and it's white centric, and there's a lot that we can address. And just even be aware of, I think is really helpful. Like Nina said, like the books, like just being aware of, and then offering different perspectives or having a discussion about it. I would really love that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Thank you. Because we don't have that committee yet in this moment, if you go on the DEI section of the Siskiyou School website, at the bottom, there are a list of resources. And if folks wanted to get together and like kind of read some of those or look at some of those, you know, if you as parents want to do that, please do. And I will continue to think of ways that I can build bridges for us all, because yeah, as I said, I know you all have good ideas and passion for it too. We are at our time. If you have more questions about these kinds of things, you can email me, you can email Nina or Aurelia, and I'd be happy to talk more. I would love to end with a quote by Rudolf Steiner, because though there are the problems with Eurocentrism, I think this quote is at the heart of what Rudolf Steiner was trying to do. And I imagine what he meant by it and what I mean by it might be a little different, but I still think that it is beautiful and relevant to our work. A healthy social life is found only when in the mirror of each soul, the whole community finds its reflection, and when in the whole community, the virtue of each one is living. Thank you so much.
I really want to thank all of you for being here. It's such a rich conversation. Moriah, thank you so much for bringing it. And we look forward to more time in the spring with this. So have a beautiful day, everyone, and blessings on your weekend.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for being here. Bye.